German bombers swirled in the air. Again, they had come to cover the area of the metal works, the meat processing plant and the petrol depot. We had already learnt the tactics of Hitler's pilots and knew that in the first run they would drop large-caliber Fugo bombs. These bombs went deep into the ground, and then burst, shaking whole neighbourhoods. So we left the dugouts and took cover in the trenches. We saw the wall of the meat-packing plant heave up before our eyes. A Fugazka lifted it into the air and tossed it aside. Smoke and dust mixed. It became dark and stuffy. When the dust settled, we saw that the explosive wave threw our sailor of the Pacific, Leonid Smirnov, and a dead fascist next to each other. Large-caliber bombs were also bursting in the area of the petrol depot. Like tissue paper, the sheet steel of petrol tanks bent and crumbled. Small-time bombs were falling there, the tails of these bombs sticking out in front of my eyes. Who knows when they'll explode? Nasty stuff. I'm sitting in the trench next to Sasha Lebediev. He came back to the company from the hospital only yesterday. In the first battle, he was caught in an avalanche of burning petrol. It's getting hotter and hotter. From a transformer box, Hitlerites are firing bursting bullets. Shells are bursting all around. Like pears from an overturned basket, mines are falling. Black smoke and dust covered the sky. I see that on Sasha Lebedev's forehead evaporated. What are you doing, Sasha? Yes, I'm used to it. I can't breathe. And then a shrapnel bomb exploded in front of our trench. Dust enveloped everyone sitting and lying down. Sasha Lebedev rushed to the bottom of the trench. His head was near Bolshashapov's feet. The commander gently lifted Sasha's head, looked at him. It's nothing, you'll get used to it. And having kept silent, suddenly talked. Here they will shoot the fascists, and then they will run to us. As always, we will meet them warmly, brush them, press them, warm them up, in short, form them, undress and undress them. A liaison came running from the 4th Company. His uniform was smoking, his eyebrows, eyelashes and hair were burnt, and through the torn gay life one could see bloody abrasions on his legs. The liaison reported to the commander. Along the long ravine, fascist machine gunners are attacking. Senior Lieutenant Shitilov, commander of the company of machine gunners, asked for support. The artillery shaft of Germans just passed into the depth of our defence, and we began to sneak to the ravine. The fascists were coming in 3 chains, one after another, climbing forward to the Volga. Orderly Lenya Seleznev, Nikolai Logvinenko, soldier Gryazev dragged the machine gun, set it on a hillock among bricks. The machine gun worked like clockwork. The first line of fascists lay down, the second also pressed to the ground. And then they noticed. Soldiers were crawling to the machine gun among the ruins. Nikolai Logvinenko took a machine gun, hung 2 anti-tank grenades on his belt and rushed to the front. One after another grenades flew. The fascists did not expect such a meeting. Our company in small groups began to advance to the glacier of the meatpacking plant. From the top of the glacier hit 2 machine guns. We pressed ourselves more tightly to the ground. To my right lay sailor Sasha Kormelitsin, and on the left side a small skinny soldier in windbreakers, in a helmet pulled up to his eyebrows, suddenly stirred. Pushing the bricks with his helmet, he crawled towards the pile of cobblestones. Bullets whistled thickly above him. I was throwing bricks out from under me, shoveling out the earth with my hands, in general, burrowing deeper and deeper. And that soldier in windbreakers keeps climbing forward. Here he got up to a cobblestone, threw a rifle with some tube on top into his right hand, took aim and whip, first on one machine gun, then on another, and they were silent. We jumped up and, throwing grenades, rushed to the glacier. Who that soldier in windbreakers? I later asked my acquaintance from the 3rd Company. This, Comrade Chief Petty Officer, is not a soldier. Who is? This is a Sergeant Sniper Galifan Abzalov. I got curious. I went to look for the ambush, Sergeant Abzalov. I crawled slowly, heavily, clumsily. I haven't learned yet. Here came the sniper's firing point. I wanted to have a word with him, to ask him about his work. But before I could open my mouth, I saw angry, greenish-coloured eyes. Get out of here, sailor. Night if nothing had happened. I thought, I find him at night and talk to him then. After all, I too can shoot accurately. Since childhood I got used to save ammunition. Another day passed. The meeting with Abzalov took place in the regiment headquarters. There, I and my fellow countryman Viktor Medvedev were included in the list of hunters for fascist beasts. At first it was necessary to learn to choose positions for observation of the enemy and shooting at the most important targets. On the first day of the hunt, we chose a place in the ruins of individual houses. We liked a house on a hillside, or rather, a large earthen cooker of the former house. We lay in the furnace and watched everything that was going on in front of us. Here it is, the battlefield. It is covered with corpses of German soldiers. Corpsmen are crawling around, helping the wounded. Seized by the injustice. A fascist soldier with a medical bag over his shoulder, with a white bandage on his left sleeve, helps not all of his own, but by choice. I don't know, but somehow Medvedev and I broke the camouflage and discovered ourselves. Fascist snipers spotted the Rotizais and I got the first bullet from them. Fortunately, the bullet hit my helmet and burst on impact. I had to urgently change my position. Meanwhile, our 4th Company, under the command of Senior Lieutenant Ifindiv, having gathered the last forces, engaged in a firefight with a group of the enemy, retreating along the Dolgy ravine. Nazi planes appeared in the air again. They were turning over the Volga for diving and dived in lines into the thick of smoke over the factory Red October. Then the bombs flew to Mamayev Kurgan, the territory of the meat-packing plant and ice storage. With each minute, the rumble of bombs, shells and mines was growing. Under the cover of the fire rampart, fresh German forces were taking the starting point for a new attack along the ravine. It was seen how densely filled with soldiers' trenches and ruins. How many of them there? It is difficult to determine. One thing was clear to us. No matter how many there were, we had to hold them off, destroy them at all costs. Do not let them go to the bank of the Volga. We could no longer remain just observers. We rushed with Viktor to the positions of our companies. In the morning of the next day, the fascists again rose and moved along the ravine. But our artillery, especially Katyusha, covered the ravine with shells. Hitlerites got into the firebag. It is difficult to count how many of them lay there. But separate shells were laid down in our location. Midshipman Nikolov was hit by a shrapnel. My fellow countryman Kuzma Afanin from Krasnufamets was also killed at that hour. I served with him in the same crew, but he revealed himself to me in the fullness of his beauty of soul at the meeting with my mother in Krasnofimsk, when we, sailors of the Pacific Fleet, unloaded from the train and marched on foot through the city. It was drizzling a fine, warm rain, a matinee like night dew. The cobbled street glistened from moisture with the light of polished stones. We walked with duffel bags without a clear line of sight. Housewives came across us. They were in a hurry to the market, but in front of our formation they stopped and looked round the rows of sailors with their eyes, searching for acquaintances. Kuzma Afonin tried to be in full view. He went out of the ranks from the right and from the left to get a better look at the people he met, if there was a mother among them. He tried to run forward, but the column commander returned him to the line. The column was led by the head of the echelon, Captain 3 rank Filipov. He as if drew in front of the inhabitants of Krasnofimsk. His head was held high, his chin stretched forward. On the long straps, clinging to the knee of his right leg, dangled a pistol in a holster. All along the street the houses were identical, one-storied with verandas, with beautiful hewn gates and wickets. We all looked at Kuzma Afanin with envy and sympathy. He is in his native town, walking along the street, on which he ran hundreds of thousands of times in his childhood. He called by name and patronymic the occupant of each house, as if testing his memory. Then Kuzma shuddered, turned pale and shouted with joy. Here is my house, and my mother is standing at the gate. Joy and excitement, like an electric current, pierced the entire column of sailors. Afonin asked permission from the commander to leave the formation and go to his mother. All the sailors turned their heads towards the house, at the gate of which stood a short old woman in a grey shawl. Her dark blouse with elbowed sleeves was bunched up on one shoulder. Her black skirt was tucked under her waist with one side of the hem, and her worn boots had the earth on them. The column stopped without a command. Kuzma got out of the line and rushed to his mother. She recognized her son. Makuzenka, my son. She wanted to run towards him, but her legs shook, did not obey her. What is it? Is it not a dream? Her voice came to us. We looked at this meeting, and each of us thought of our mother. Mother is a holy word. It's pride. It's the root of the family. A mother is human immortality. The very first word addressed to her is Mama. When a man passes away, his last dying word on his lips is also addressed to his mother. There is no deeper, purer, nobler than a mother's love for her children. Kuzma ran up to his mother, tall and strong. He took her in his arms and, in front of the whole formation of sailors, rocked her on his chest like a small child for a long time. He understood that he was not going to a banquet. There is no war without casualties. Maybe, for the last time in his life, he pressed against his mother's heart. He cried. I don't know whether they were tears of joy or grief, but they were sincere. The line of sailors stood holding their breath. After standing like that in front of us with my mother in his arms, Kuzma pushed the wicket door open with his foot and disappeared into the yard. I did not see what was happening there behind the wooden fence. But when the line moved on, our ranks levelled up and a chiselled step was heard. It was as if we were greeting Kuzma Afonin's mother, walking with a chiselled step on the cobblestone pavement. Behind the outermost houses began the vegetable gardens, which ended with a shrubbery. Behind the shrubbery was a ridge of mixed forest. In the middle of the forest shone a small green clearing, all strewn with flowers. In the very middle of this beautiful area, as if by order, grew a branching birch tree. Here we stopped. The Russian birch and Kuzma Afonin's mother stood before my eyes as an embodiment of the motherland. Here Kuzma caught up with us. How much joy and sadness was in his eyes. He, like me, looked at the birch tree, smiled, and then sighed heavily. It's nothing, Vasya. We'll survive, my mother told us so. And there he was, dead. Mother's wish didn't come true. How can I write to her about it? I won't write for now, but I'll try to fulfill the combat task for him and for myself. As long as my eyes can see, the bullets of my rifle and automatic rifle will not give the enemy mercy. I hit, as I know how, only live targets. My comrades in arms do the same. We avenge for Kuzma Afonin, for our dead friends. Still, groups of Hitler's machine gunners made their way to the Volga. The 13th Guards Division of General A.I. Rodimtsev, or rather its remnants, was cut off from the main forces of the army. On the order of the commander of the 62nd Army, a battalion of headquarters guards and a reserve tank company were thrown here. They were given a task to destroy the enemy machine gunners who had broken through to the Volga. The commander of our regiment, Major Mitatelov, for his part threw a group of machine gunners and the 2nd Machine Gun Company under the command of Senior Lieutenant Bolshishapov. The fight lasted about 4 hours. Elbow communication between our regiment and Rodimtsev's guardsmen was again restored. Only on the site of the 13th Guards Division, 200 metres from the western edge of the Dolgi ravine, the fascist machine gunners held a white brick 3-story house. A short respite gave us an opportunity to replenish ammunition and grenades, repair machine guns and restore minefields. Before dusk, the enemy aviation appeared again. Now dive bombers were dropping their bombs in the Dolgi ravine. That's where this bombing caught me. Flame, smoke, thunderclaps. Everything merged together. The machine gunners from the companies of Senior Lieutenants Shitilov and Defindiv laid down in the ravine. There were enough shelters for everyone. We, survivors able to fight, were 5 times less than the advancing ones. This time Hitlerites chased to the Volga their allies, Romanian companies. We already knew that Romanian officers, going into the attack, shout at the top of their voices, as if trying to outshout the noise of the battle, and when we heard such a shout, it was clear who was coming. Well, you can't take us by shouting. Despite the numerical superiority of the Romanians, the sailors stood firm. Not a step back. On my feet, Kurzovi boots from someone else's foot, 43rd size, with short, wide shanks. The heels are iron horseshoes. My footsteps could well be heard by the fascist soldiers who were in the same shop on the other side of the wall. One day I was going down the steps to the cellar and suddenly felt that someone was waiting for me. I was. A girl appeared from behind a column, short, carrying a sanitary bag on her shoulder. That's how wrong you can be if you believe a rumour. What are you mistaken about, honoured one? I asked. Yes. How so? The girl smiled, took me by the elbow, and led me to the bright side of the cellar. I obediently stepped, looking at her profile. No, it wasn't Masha Laskutova. Masha was left on the other side of the Volga in a medical unit, and she seems to have already forgotten our oath in the wagon, or does not believe that I am still alive and active in this hellfire. Unbelievable, but so. At last we were in the light. The girl's face reminded me of something familiar. Mercenty. So where were you wrong? I heard the sound of footsteps and thought that a tall, healthy man was coming, she said, and after a moment's silence, confessed. I remembered a young man. I got excited, so I hid behind a column. Yes, I was too late. Someone then has already captured her. Never did young man know that you love him. She looked at me point blank, squinted her shaggy eyelashes and cut me off. Am I a fool to tell him? But you confessed it to me. She sensed the mockery in my voice. I don't know you, so why shouldn't I talk to you about him? She looked me over from head to toe. Where did you get your uniform and trousers so bad? I had a job at night. I ran into some barbed wire. A needle with a long green thread appeared in the girl's hands. Before I knew it, she had tied a knot and started patching holes in my trousers. When the trousers were finished, she ordered, "Now, sit down, sailor, take off your uniform." I did not make myself big. It was nice to sit with a beautiful girl. She worked the needle quickly, like a dressmaker, and I kept my eyes on her, trying to remember where I had seen that face. She felt my gaze on her and raised her head jerkily. Well, why are you staring at me? You'll fall in love. It's too late. We should have warned her earlier when we were travelling from Vladivostok. I can't stand, hate small, skinny, snub-nosed, blue-eyed men. She cut me off. Do you understand? Almost, I answered. Hey, you are not the hero of my novel. I'll sew up your shirt and then go upstairs and get under the barbed wire. She probably thought I was a sapper. In order not to be indebted, I decided to make fun of my unknown, tall rival. It's good to hang dogs on long ones, I said, and sat waiting for her to answer. And on the low, cats can freely. Got it. I can't stand the smell of cats. Of course they can, I said. You're going along with it, you wuss. Nothing else to say? There is something else. And if there is, don't agree, just say it. A great figure is a fool. A small piece of gold is a big piece of gold. My interlocutor jumped off the bricks as if scalded with boiling water, threw me a tunic with a needle. If you're so clever, sew it up yourself. What a gold digger. She didn't even look back, ran upstairs and got lost among the ruins. I sat down on the place where the girl had just sat, darned the last hole in my sleeve, put the needle and thread under the flap of my breast pocket, and bitterly remarked to myself, I'm not fit to be a wit. Thus began for me the day of the 7th of October.
In Stalingrad on that day, there was a relative calm. We were repairing the casing of the Maxim, preparing spare barrels for the machine guns, filling the ribbons with cartridges, collecting grenades of different systems from all the warring states.
The fascists were also doing something without making a fuss. The night passed in tense, anxious expectation.
The dawn broke and the machine guns crackled. And when it dawned, fights broke out in the neighbourhood of the factory Red October and at the meat-packing plant. Like tar in a huge cauldron, the ground on Mamev Kurgan was boiling and
in the defence area of our battalion. The metalware factory. The enemy was silent. I wanted to shout, "What are you waiting for, you bastards? Come out!"
And only at about 10 o'clock artillery hit us, followed by mortars, and then, as if to summarise the results, there were planes. Bombs were bursting everywhere. 1.5 metre high walls collapsed. Fireproof clay cracked, metal trusses bent, reinforced concrete ceilings fell. And suddenly, all at once, everything went silent. The planes flew away. The artillery moved its fire deep into our defence. So, expect an attack. We had no one to shoot at that moment. Some were entrenching themselves. Others were lying motionless with their eyes open.
But there was no attack. The fascists suffered from the bombing even, perhaps, more than us. At night we did not prevent them from approaching our front line. They had accumulated a lot of them there, and now they can't seem to recover from their own bombs. In general, they missed the time to attack. But we had time to fortify ourselves in new places.
On the first floor of the office of the hardware factory, Senior Lieutenant Bolshevshapov installed machine guns. It was an excellent present. The bombing had cleared the piles of ruins, and the sector of fire increased.
Finally, the Germans came to their senses and rushed to the attack. The distance between us was 150 metres. Our machine guns started to work. The first line of the attackers managed to stop almost near the very wall of the boiler shop, to suppress the machine guns. The Nazis rolled out a cannon and opened direct fire. Now shells were bursting inside the office. Our machine gunners were silent.
It was necessary to destroy the cannon or its calculation. But how? Sniper fire or grenades. And who would do it?
The company commander saw Sasha Karlentiv, a short Urals lad, a sniper. He always appeared unexpectedly, at the most critical moment. He was dressed lighter than an ordinary infantry soldier. Skinny, thin legs are wrapped in dirty wrappings. Tattered, sweat-soaked overalls, smeared with blood and dirt, seemed to have grown into his skin. A shattered shrapnel helmet was pulled over his head up to his ears, but his big blue eyes shone brightly. He was the one who knew about him, throwing a grenade, sometimes shouting, "Krauts, catch! Our Isusitines are flying."
And here, our Sasha is already on the roof of the office. How did he get there, under fire? He shot once, second, third, and immediately enemy machine guns whipped at him. Sasha recoiled to the side. Was he killed? Feldsher Lenya Seleznev began to sneak into the corridor of the office. He crawled closer, shout, "Sasha, are you alive?"
"Yes, I'm alive, but I can't move," came the reply. "Two snipers had me in their sights. Stay away." Seleznev quickly returned and reported to the battalion commander.
Youth," grumbled the commander. The guy got a little hot-headed. To his youth and temperament would be ahead of judgment. That's what I need in the battalion. "Philosophy is good after the battle," said Deputy Commander Yablushikin. "Miss, the cannon must be blown up with grenades," said the commander. The liaison of the 4th Company Pronishev, a broad-shouldered, snub-nosed, blue-eyed Siberian, volunteered to fulfill this task.
"Come here, look," the commander called him to himself. "Now you bent, run across the courtyard at the very wall you will lie down. Take a good look round. Note from which side the sight is shot through. From under the wall of the boiler shop crawl down into the funnel, and from there to the locomotive. From behind the locomotive and throw grenades. You will be covered by snipers. Remember, the way is dangerous, the task is difficult. Take your time and act cool. Do you understand me?" "That's right. I've been fighting for 2 years." Pronishev adjusted the anti-tank grenades on his belt, loaded his automatic rifle, saluted, and ran out of the shop.
Next to me stood Misha Masayev. I asked here,
"Well, will it come?" "He should. If he has enough stamina."
Pronishev rapid throw crossed the courtyard. Now he had to lie down at the wall, as the commander ordered, but Pronishev immediately ran to the boiler shop.
"Get back," shouted the commander. "Come back." Having made sure that it was useless to shout, the combat fell silent. Pronishev ran through the open place, rounded the boiler room. Here he is already equalled with a transformer box. The fascists did not shoot. Maybe they thought that the Russian soldier was running to them as a prisoner. There were 15 meters to the locomotive. And there he will not get it, I thought to myself. And then the machine guns started to work. Pronishev jerked, stopped, turned his face in our direction and fell. All of us were numb. Combat stood pale, silent. "That's what unreasonable risk leads to," he finally said. "Pronishtaveby." The commanders looked at each other as if consulting in silence. Then the commander turned to us and calmly, as if about something ordinary. "Well, who will be able to blow up this cannon?" I looked at Misha Masayev. He looked back. "Come on." Permission, comrade captain, for Masayev and me."
Sayeth, a healthy, strong sailor with a dashingly twisted moustache, stood next to me. The battalion commander looked at Senior Lieutenant Bolshashupov as if asking him, "Well, how are your sailors?"
Bisupov a reply, "They will, be sure." Combat approached, looked intently into our eyes, then asked,
"How will you act?"
"First, we will sneak along the shop along the wall. Then," I pointed my finger at the trench. "No. So you decided to march on the fascists?"
"Next is an underground pipe a man can crawl through. We'll go to the boiler room, to our machine gunners, then crawl to the locomotive. We'll throw grenades from behind the locomotive."
So underground. All right. But don't be in a hurry. We can't help you here. It's up to you, understand? Understood. We answered. Combat, putting his big hands on our shoulders.
Well on your way, submariners.
Submariners he called all sailors. Let's go along the trench. Misha stepped on the chest of a dead fascist. His foot fell through, almost fell, but everything went safely so far. We climbed into the underground pipe. I went first. Misha followed me. It's damp, dark, stuffy, slippery and sticky under my hands. We can't turn round. It's cramped. It's nothing for me, but Misha is heavy. His shoulders are broad. I hear his heavy, intermittent breathing. I have to stop, wait. Crawls up, sniffles and pushes me. Crawl further. Why are you lying down? The pipe turns. Fresh air hit my nose. I could see that there was a breach or some other vent somewhere nearby. It got easier. We crawl along the pipe sleeve to the right. About 5 minutes go by. We find ourselves in a brick pit covered with an iron lid. This is one of the intershop ditches that unite the factory sewerage system. We lie there and think. Where are we under the shop occupied by the fascists? Or under the boiler room where our machine gunners are sitting, who during the last battle got surrounded? Misha opened one flap of the iron lid.
Well, what's there?
You can hardly see through such a slit. Throw the lid off. When the lid fell off, we saw that we were in some huge workshop with burnt walls. Bullets whistling all over the shop. They hit the machines, shooting sparks. There are piles of unprocessed parts near the machines, collapsed on them, lying on their stomachs, on their backs, on their sides, killed soldiers. And Hitlerites and our comrades, sailors Pacific, there was no movement in the shop. We crawled out of the pit, crawled up to the machine, pressed down. The roof of the shop had long ago been torn off, and we could see the sky. There were aeroplanes circling, an air battle was going on. Artillery was rumbling. Having had a break, we crawled to the boiler room. Masayev skipped through the place under fire and was waiting for me in the boiler room, pressed against the wall. I rushed towards him, but then automatic rifles crackled and rifle shots slammed. We had been spotted. My right leg burned above the knee. My leg became heavier and as if longer, clinging to every ledge. And the fire is getting stronger. Slowly moving forward, I made my way to Misha. I'm soaked. My clothes are splattered with blood. I lifted myself up, approached the hole where Misha was looking.
He asks Seva.
Wounded? I shook my head in the negative. In the boiler room there were 6 machine gunners and 1 machine gunner, Sailor Plexin. Cut off from the battalion, they turned the boiler room into a real fortress and repelled attack after attack. Misha and I marvelled at the cunning and cleverness of the guys. They collected automatic rifles, directed their barrels into the breaches in the walls. A piece of water pipe was screwed to each machine gun. A wire was threaded through the pipe. One end of it was tied to the trigger and the other to the machine gunner on duty. And Plexin had machine guns in 3 embrasures. I asked,
How do you manage? How do your self-shooters work? Plexin smiled.
That machine gun over there and a couple of these machine guns are hitting the door at the same time. You seem right against the transformer box. Judging by the density of fire, the fascists must have thought that there was at least a company in the boiler room. We agreed how to proceed. We decided that Plexin would cover us with the fire of his machine gun when we were making our way to the locomotive. We began to crawl to the locomotive. Bursting bullets were whistling and bursting all around. Green rationed our progress. A green rocket soared into the air. It was a conditional signal and a sign of approval. On our bellies, we slid to the bottom of the funnel. Misha, did you see the combat welcomed us? I asked. Misha hissed like a goose. What are you cheering me up? Do you think the Kazan Tatar was afraid? I will now show them how sailors can have fun. He was about to stick out of the funnel, but I held him back in time. A bursting bullet cracked right in front of his nose. We signalled the danger with a red rocket in the direction of the transformer box. The machine gun started talking. It's Plexin. Well done. Our elbows easily and quickly carried me forward. Misha, seeing that I had reached the locomotive, followed me. He crawled clumsily, heavily. Hitler's machine gunners opened fire on him from the window of the transformer box.
What to do? I could throw grenades and blow up the cannon myself, but I had to help my comrade.
Pranishev was lying by the locomotive. He was badly wounded. There was a rifle beside him. I took it, took cover behind the locomotive wheel, calculated the distance and fired. One barrel in the window of the transformer box disappeared. The second machine gunner rushed into the brick ruins, lay down and opened fire again. I took aim, fired and clearly saw the fascist's nose. Misha Masayev got to the locomotive unharmed. It was 10 meters to the fascist cannon. Masayev is a big guy, his arms are long. He stood up, went behind the locomotive and threw 2 anti-tank grenades one after the other. From the first explosion, the cannon jumped and turned sideways. From the second, the wheel fell off, and the barrel, like an anti-aircraft gun, went upwards. Apparently, the servants also lay dead. The Nazis must have been waiting for our attack, but nobody attacked them. Then they decided to surround us and take us alive. It was not to be. Saksin's machine gun started working again. He must withdraw. I ordered Masayev to capture Pranishev and crawl back to the funnel, and I stayed to cover them. Misha stuck out from under the locomotive and fell down. Fortunately, the bullet hit his helmet. Misha was only stunned for a few seconds. It started to get dark. Through a gap in the wheel, I saw 2 fascists crawling on the right. I couldn't stay any longer. They would probably catch me. I threw the last grenade and ran to the crater. Pranishev was lying at the bottom of the funnel, moaning and repeating. Water, water.
Masayev bandaged his chest.
It was getting dark. The guys are waiting for us in the boiler room. Misha took Pranishev on his back and crawled into the boiler room. I followed him. We were moving slowly. Fatigue was affecting us. Tracer bullets were flying above us, as if showing the fascists our way. Here they are crawling, beat them. We did not think that we would get Pranishev to the boiler room alive, but we decided not to leave even his corpse to the fascists. It was dark and quiet in the boiler room. Riksin, seriously wounded, was lying by the Maxim. Misha dragged him aside. He woke up and whispered, "The Germans are here," and lost consciousness again. There was not another living soul in the boiler room. We slowly approached the door and suddenly heard footsteps and conversation of fascists behind the wall. "So we can't pass through here." Pranishev regained consciousness, mumbled something incoherent, then fell silent again. We moved him and put him next to Plexin. The voices of the fascists became distant. We went down into the hatch and agreed. Misha would sneak into the battalion, and I would stay here to guard the wounded. When Misha left, I climbed out of the hatch and listened. I thought, if the fascists came, I would throw grenades at them, shoot them with a machine gun. As a last resort, I would open the hatch, go down into the trench, and from there I would defend my comrade. My wounded leg whimpered. I lay down against the wall. I lay down for a while, then I got up, checked my grenades and my automatic rifle. I was armed and felt confident. Our machine gun was whipping along the eastern wall of the boiler room. Individual bullets flew into the boiler room. I waited for the appearance of fascist soldiers from the side of the locomotive, but for some reason they did not. Finally, it began to lighten up. From the eastern side, automatic rifles rumbled. Grenade explosions boomed. I pressed myself tighter against the wall, took hold of the grenade ring. "Who will be here now?" And suddenly, Russian speech. I shouted with all my might. "Hey, brothers, they're alive here."
"We know," I heard a reply.
It was Bolshasapov. He and a group of soldiers were brought here by Misha Masayev. 5 days in a row. Starting from the morning of the 16th of October till the afternoon of the 21st, Hitler's troops attacked our positions in the factory district of Stalingrad. Aviation, artillery, tanks, infantry, everything was thrown to suppress our defense. The fascists decided to break through here to the Volga at all costs. They rushed forward without regard to losses. Sometimes it was thought that Hitler decided to drown his entire army in blood here. At first, the main blow was struck at the tractor and barricadne plants. 3 or 4 kilometers to the right of the section of our division, which defended the territory of the factory of metal products, oil storage, meat processing plant, and half of Mamayev Kurgan. What was going on in the area of the tractor plant? It is difficult for me to recount. I was not there. But even from the outside, it was horrible to watch. Hundreds of aeroplanes were circling endlessly over the plant. Somebody calculated that only on 14 October about 3,000 aerial missions were made to Tractor and Barricadney. How many bombs fell on each defender of this district? It is not difficult to calculate if we know that there were 3 divisions defending there. In short, only for one day the fascists spent there on each soldier on half a dozen bombs.
But the site still met the Nazis' fierce resistance. Our soldiers learnt to live in the fire. To the enemy, probably, it seemed that here shoot stones, shoot bricks, shoot... And Hitlerites did not spare neither bombs, nor shells, nor mines, trying to grind into sand even stones and bricks, did not spare bullets and on the dead, crushed them with tracks of tanks.
It is hard to look from the outside when it is difficult for comrades. It seems better to be there yourself. Such is the nature of the Russian soldier. That's why we asked our division commander Nikolai Filipovich Batyuk to send us, Marines to help our right neighbour, but he replied,
The enemy is only waiting for us to bear our defence.
And our colonel, who we nicknamed Refractory Batyuk, was not mistaken. Not without reason he was a favourite of the commander of the 62nd. After 2-day threshing of the territory of the plant Red October, the centre of the German fire attack began to move. The ground was upheaved and on our sight.
I don't know what our neighbours on the right and left thought about us at that moment. How many bombs fell on the shops of the factory of metal products where our battalion was defending, in the companies of which there were 20. 30 active bayonets left. There was no time to count. I will only say that only in the first hour of processing the positions of our battalion Hitler's dive bombers, in groups of 3 nines, each made 4 runs. The bombs were falling and falling. After the airstrike was followed by artillery and mortar, a tornado.
The first infantry attack was repulsed by machine gun fire, the second with grenades and machine gun fire. The next attack began with a massive onslaught of fascist grenadiers from 3 sides. We had to engage in hand-to-hand combat first on the right wing of the defence, then in the centre, and then on the left, in the tool shop. I was just a little gaping, and some grenadier managed to reach my back with his flat, knife-like bayonet. Somehow I found myself at the battalion command post, standing next to the commander near the breach in the wall. It's midday.
The fight doesn't stop. Pillars of smoke and dust are rising upwards, walls are falling down, covering the dead and seriously wounded.
2 elderly soldiers with stretchers appeared. They brought the wounded sailor, silently put him next to us on a cloak, and again with a quick step crossed the territory of the factory yard, swung over the tram line, the motorway, and disappeared in the ruined wooden buildings. I must have been thrown here, but I woke up and got up. There's no respite, ours are retreating. The tool shop was taken over by the fascists again. The lathe shop was left in the neutral zone. The Germans have taken the ice storehouse. The 4th Rifle Company of Senior Lieutenant Efin Dev retreated behind the tram line and entrenched on the boundary of the unfinished red brick house. The day before yesterday, the regiment commander Major Mitrelev was here. He ordered to appoint me sniper. It happened like this. We are sitting in the pit, listening to the regiment commander. A lull. Suddenly my comrade Misha Masayev, who was monitoring the enemy, shouted to Masya, the Kraut has shown up. I raised my rifle and, almost without aiming, fired a shot. The Kraut fell down. A few seconds later the second one appeared there. I killed the second one too. We who fired? Asked the regimental commander, watching through binoculars at what was happening. Combat reporting. Chief Sergeant Zaitsev. Give him a sniper rifle, ordered the major. And calling me over, Comrade Zaitsev, count all the fascists you finish. There are already 2. Start your count with them. I understood this instruction of the regiment commander as an order, but I could not start its fulfillment according to all rules. The situation did not allow it.
And today our battalion was half-enveloped. We had only one way, to go down into the long ravine, and along the bottom of the ravine, and along the bottom of the ravine, to the territory of the oil depot. And there, between the pipes, we could stealthily sneak. Miss Path knew in the battalion only 3 PP. Me, Mikhail Masayev, and the commander himself, but none of us did not want to think about it. The path could pull to retreat.
In order not to think about it, I raised my head. Up there, under the very roof, an exhaust pipe is built in. There's a bladed fan in the pipe, and a ladder-like iron ladder leads to the fan. The day before yesterday, I used this structure for a sniper firing post. From above, I could clearly see the location of the fascists. Next to me, near the ventilator, settled down Corrector of Artillery Fire Senior Sergeant Vasily Fifanov. Vasily's connection was not working well. The receiver was crackling, beeping, he was nervous, shouting, and I was reloading my rifle leisurely.
I liked to hit for choice. After each shot, it seemed as if I could hear the impact of the bullet on the enemy's head. Someone was looking in my direction, not knowing they were living their last second.
That was the day before yesterday. I take that position again. But just as I had time to think about it, a blast wave tore apart the pipe, tore the ladder from the wall. From the hail of shrapnel, we managed to slip into the basement. In the basement, there was a medical center of the battalion. Klava Svinsova and Dora Shuknovich, the same nurse who sewed up my trousers and a uniform, bandaged the wounded, and then I remembered that I should show my leg. On the way to the cellar, the bandage had come off, and I felt a warm trickle running down my leg. I went up to Dora. She lifted her kind black eyes and said with contrived severity, "Here you are, you restless one. You've been hit again."
"No, sister. This time it's all right."
"Why do you keep looking at my eyes?" "You're in love. You found the time." She kept bandaging the sailor's head as if she couldn't see me. I stood and waited. Finally, she straightened up, soaked a cotton wool in alcohol, and wiped her hands. "Well, tell me, lover, what you've got there." "The bandage has come off the hole. Looks like it's bleeding." "Why are you standing there talking like that? Take off your trousers. I'll look at your hole."
I'm embarrassed. I'm standing there, slowly unbuckling my belt.
"Mighty quick. Get it down below your knees." The smell of alcohol, pleasantly burning the wound.
I put a plaster on your wound. It's better than any bandage. That's it. You can get dressed.
I bent over, and from under my shirt at the waist I could see blood. "Wait a minute."
That's when she found the bayonet wound in my back. After dressing, I went to the exit from the cellar. There stood the battalion commander, Captain Kotov. Nearby, Logvinenko, someone else.
Combat stood for a while, as if making sure that everyone came up, pushed the door open, shouted, "Follow me," and rushed to the ravine Dolgi. Running through the ruins, jumping over logs was hard for me. Combat stopped. Somewhere halfway along he got a deep trench. Here I caught up with him. The captain sat silently in a corner with his back against the wall. His pale face was covered with drops of sweat. I sat down near him, a little breathing. Then I asked myself a question. "We left the infirmary, the wounded. Will they praise us for that?" Captain Kotov seemed to wake up, silently stood up, corrected his automatic rifle on his side, crawled out on the berm, shook his head, spat in the direction of the office of the hardware factory and rushed back. We followed him. Enemy machine guns pinned us to the foundations of the house.
The ground floor and the semi-basement of this house were crowded with our fighters. In two large halls lay the wounded. Leonid Seleznev, an orderly, was thrashing among them. Here went and crawled soldiers from different sides. Approaches to the house were covered by machine gunners of Evgeny Shetilov's company. Captain Kotov stopped here. We were ashamed to look each other in the eyes. We ran to the Volga.
I couldn't sit idle. Having smoked a Makharovka to burn my lips out of frustration, I decided to go up to the first floor. It seemed impossible to walk there at full height. Bullets were flying into the door and window openings. I lay down on my stomach and crawled to the break in the brick wall, disguised myself under a pile of boards. From here I could see that a fascist machine gun was firing at the house. I have a machine gun, grenades, a pistol at my waist. All weapons for close combat, and the machine gun is 300 meters away. I need a rifle. What to do? I have to crawl out from under the planks again. I decided to crawl out backwards, so as not to destroy the camouflage. I just moved. I hear Nikolai Logvinenko's voice. "Why are you tossing and turning? Wounded again?" "No." "I see a fascist machine gun. I need a rifle. Bring it from the cellar." Nikolai quickly brought a rifle. I take the machine gunner's head in my sights. A shot, and the machine gun was silenced. 2 more shots, and 2 ammunition carriers, twitching, rested next to the machine gunner. Just 3 shots, and our battalion came to life. Signalmen, messengers, ammunition carriers. It seems that only now infantry commanders began to see that I was the right man in the rifle unit. And sometimes they used to look at me like this. I was small in stature and could do nothing. There were a lot of annoying moments when we sailors joined the rifle division. I remember back there in Krasnofimsk, an army-style ruler rolled up to the Red Fleet formation. There were several infantry commanders on the ruler. Some of them had battle honours on their uniforms, experienced men. The head of our team clapped his hand on the briefcase as if to say, "Here they are, all my young men. Here they are. For 5 years we raised them, brought them up, prepared them for sea combat. But if we need to test our strength on land, here we are." Distribution by units and services began. Each commander chose his own men. I see he takes those who are healthier, stronger. They sift them as through a sieve. The small stuff goes to waste, but the big ones stay. They go to work, such as Afonin Starostin, straight into artillerymen. Such selection is obviously not to my liking. My speciality is accountant clerk. Combat commanders do not need such a speciality. And someone even said, "What the hell do I need your clerk? I have enough of such good in my unit without him." The general column of sailors is melting away, going to their units. I'm standing aside. The mood is murderous. I agree to go anywhere to any position as long as they decide sooner. How hard it is to feel superfluous, unnecessary. I don't understand who's to blame. I come closer to my superiors. I met the look of a senior lieutenant, an artilleryman, on whose chest is the Order of the Red Banner. As it turned out later, it was Ilyashay Shuklin, commander of a battery of anti-tank guns. He distinguished himself in the battles near Kastorne. Now he is asking for one man to complete the gun crew. Take Zajev from my reserve. He's got an average education. He's a literate guy. I'm sure he'll fit in. No. So I need an artilleryman, not a financier. Chuklin cut off. Only by the end of the day I was taken to the economic platoon of the 2nd Battalion. Back in Vladivostok before being sent to the front. I got into a company commanded by Lieutenant Trofimov. He skillfully conducted classes on teaching hand-to-hand combat techniques. At the moment of training he shouted to his opponent, "I strike for real. Get angry, as in a real fight." No matter how hard we tried to strike at the lieutenant, he skillfully avoided them. He laughed at me easily. "You're not tall enough for hand-to-hand work, Comrade Chief Petty Officer, and your arms are short. You've grown wide, but you're not tall enough." At the same time, Lieutenant Trofimov put me at the disposal of the personnel department of the aviation unit. I went to the headquarters as ordered. In a small room at a desk sat a major in a flight uniform. There was not a single hair on his head, which made the skin on his head seem as thin as tissue paper and shiny. The thin lips, heavy chin, and fleshy nose did not please me. On the desk was a stack of personnel records cards. In the card it was noted that I was an excellent marksman. After my report, the major looked at me for a long time without blinking, as if he wanted to see in me something special, unknown to anyone. I felt uncomfortable from such a stare and decided to respond in the same way. I gawked my eyes at the chief. I don't know what the major was thinking at that time, but in my mind I answered him. I can withstand such a look. Apparently, the major got tired of silence and decided to ask me a question. "Where did you learn to shoot well?" "Yes, in the Navy." "It's a big fleet." "In the School of Arms," I answered the major as briefly. "Now I will teach you how to really shoot." After these words my mood was completely ruined. While I would learn from him, and the war would be over. The major told me in detail what I was to learn. I listened to the major to the end and reply, "You're going to teach me to shoot, but you shoot worse than me. I am asking for the 2nd year on the front line in the active army and want to beat the enemy, not targets." My harsh tone could have angered the major, but something happened that I did not expect. The major jumped out of his chair, came up to me, took my hand and started shaking it, and saying, "You're a real sailor, not a wimp. Some people, at the slightest opportunity, try to get away from the front, but not to the war, and you're like that. All right, I'll grant your request. You're free to go." After these words I wanted to hug and kiss this bold, hollow-eyed man. I never thought that such a seemingly dry man had a sensitive soul. That's how I gave up the radio gunnery school. Then, having found myself in Bolshespov's machine gun company, I could already show my abilities as a Ural hunter-shooter. The strict, demanding and sensitive commander of machine gunners, once at a halt, still on the way to Stalingrad, sat me down next to a machine gun and asked, "Do you know anything about this machine?" "I know something," I answered, and I started to dismantle the machine gun quickly, almost without looking at it. The senior lieutenant looks, smiles. At the next halt, Captain Kotov came to me. "The company reported that you know the machine gun well and shoot well. But I doubt it. How can financiers shoot well when they appear once a year at the range?" It hurt me. "I'm going to the front, and here's such distrust." "You're wrong, Comrade Captain. I may be as good a shot as you." "All right, let's check it out." "Might I, please?" "Ritov," shouted to the commander's orderly. "Measure 30 paces, put the bottle to me with the bottle." Bolshespovov is awkwardly stomping next to the commander. He's rooting for me. Combat takes out of the holster pistol, aiming at the bottle. A shot, a second one. The bottle explodes with a clang. "You shoot well," I dared to remark. Combat turns to me and reply. "In the bottle you, of course, difficult to hit, so try in my cap," and gives me his pistol with 3 rounds. "You'll be left without a cap, Comrade Captain." Meanwhile, Ritov runs with the commander's cap and puts it on the place where the bottle had just been lying before. I got comfortable, left hand behind my back, took aim and smoothly pressed the trigger. The cap moved. The sailors, who watched the whole picture, murmured, "Went to the target with the combatant too." The bullet pierced through the cap. The captain silently put it on and put down the bottle. I have 2 more cartridges. I shoot, and the neck of the bottle flies off. "Hurrah!" shouted the sailors. "This is our way in Flotsam." "Well done," agrees with the sailors' combat. "Here's a parabellum and 100 rounds of ammunition. You'll stay in the machine gun company. Beat the fascists." Thank you, Comrade Captain. I'll beat them." The sailors congratulated me on my baptism of fire. There was a doubter Zetiev was just lucky. "Lucky, you say?" Somebody asked me. "Have you heard anything about the Ural hunters?" "No." "Well, then keep quiet." The final recognition of my abilities as a marksman was established already here, in the battles for the metalware factory. My 3 accurate shots silenced the machine gun, which did not let my comrades raise their heads. Night came. Rockets flashed in the air. Blinding light alternated with impenetrable darkness. From the first floor we went downstairs. I went into the compartment to the battalion commander. He was sitting on a trench coat with his legs tucked under him, talking on the phone. From the fragmentary phrases, it was clear to me that overnight we should regain the lost positions. That was to be expected. The night must be ours. "We need Fenki and Degdeyevik without shirts," said the combat. It was he who asked for grenades. Fenki. F1 Degdeyevik G without defensive covers. Before the attack, seize 10-12 grenades. Break into the house in 2, you and the grenade, both be dressed lightly. You without a duffel bag, the grenade without a shirt. A great weapon is a grenade. We loaded up with them, as they say, to the brim. We loaded up and went. Our Hitlerites got a lot from our pocket artillery this night. By morning we restored our positions in the forge shop of the hardware factory. The battalion command post also moved into the forge shop. The shop was divided by a blank wall of white brick. This wall had its own rubble foundation, and the masonry in its upper part was more than half a metre above the roof. Everything around is destroyed, but the wall stands and stands, separating the defenders of Stalingrad and the fascists. One could hear coughing and talking of the enemies. Every step must be taken with caution. So a few days ago, Sasha Rutherford was digging under the foundation of the wall. He bumped into a large stone. No matter how much he pounded on it, it didn't move. Then Sasha found a heavy sledgehammer in the forge. With the first blow, the stone flew out like a cork from a bottle. There was a shriek from the other side, and then a burst of gunfire. A fascist machine gunner was shooting into the hole. Ritov pressed himself against the wall and sat neither alive nor dead. If the German had moved the barrel of the machine gun 2 centimetres to the right, he would have been pierced through. Only a minute later Ritov came to his senses, took a grenade out of his pocket, pulled out the ring and threw it into the hole. There was an explosion and a deafening silence. Thick black smoke was billowing from the hole, and now Sasha was squinting slyly at the hole. Maybe we should throw a couple of grenades down there. I agreed with him, but at that moment the sirens of German dive bombers howled over our heads again. Again, as yesterday, dive bombers, artillery. However, no infantry is not visible. 3 tanks appeared. One of them was immediately set on fire by our armoured gunners. On the right, machine guns rumbled thickly. The enemy infantry came up there. They did not come here. We beat them off. Sight at the right neighbour lasted till noon. Then everything went silent. 2, 3, 4 hours passed. The enemy's attacks weakened, faded away. It happened on 21 October 1942. That day the Germans seemed to come to their senses. There were no more such fierce attacks. Paulus's soldiers became afraid of us and started to bury themselves deeper into the ground. That's when I, as an accurate marksman, was again given the task of mastering the art of sniping. I was given a rifle with a telescopic sight, and I was finally included in the division sniper list.